the football transfer portal, the spring portal, transfer portal window opened. It was last week, correct? Yes, a lot's been going on. A&M's, and we talked about this last week, I believe, that A&M's primary needs on offense and defense, starting with defense, defensive tackle depth, adding a body or two more to that group. We saw that this defense in the spring game actually looked very good. Now, granted, it's a little hard to judge, being that defenses usually look better because they know the offense very well, vice versa. But overall, the edge group looks great. And, I just actually did an article that ESPN compared, was talking about who will replace A&M's A&M's recent NFL draft players. Shamar Stewart obviously went number 1 to Cincinnati. Who's going to be his direct replacement? The name they picked was Dayon Hayes, the transfer from Colorado, who has dealt with injury issues, had a very good showing in the spring game, and has I think he has only over 12 sacks during his career with Pittsburgh. But there's a lot of veteran depth at the edge group. So really on defense, outside of maybe another cornerback or maybe another defensive tackle, that's probably what Mike Elko's looking at. On offense, wide receiver has been the position trying to replace Noah Thomas's length, and red zone ability has been a topic. Ted Hurst was a name that was brought up. We all covered it. I remember I was getting intel from that A&M was pursuing him. He opted to stay at Georgia State, which was a little surprising, but in today's NIL world, even the Georgia States are giving out deals. but yeah, so that it's kind of interesting. You look at, so really focus on wide receiver. You kind of look at the players who are available, and it's really, you get a lot of 6'3" guys. You got a couple 6'4" guys. We're talking Jeremiah Noga from Oregon State. Donovan Hamilton, who he just actually committed to Ball State. Evan Haynes, who was a North Carolina transfer. A lot of these taller guys who could provide you what you need to replace Noah Thomas, but I just don't think it's that easy. And I think that this coaching staff is not doing what a lot of others do, which is just plug and play. Like, let's just find a guy who's just similar in height to what Thomas can provide. And then just let's put him on the offense and see what he can do. I think that we haven't heard a lot of what they're trying to do right now. And I think they're keeping it pretty closed off, because I think what they saw with this current wide receiver rotation and how they performed in the spring game, they may feel pretty good about what they have right now. I don't know if you've heard anything else. I personally have not. I think it's been very quiet with any transfer portal addition, but I don't know. I think maybe Isaiah Williams and Ashton Bethel-Roman stepping up the way they did, even though they're not, a Noah Thomas clone or anything like that. They're a little bit smaller, quicker wide receivers. Maybe that's the way they want to go, and then hoping that their 5-star freshman Jerome Miles will be healthy enough to give you that type of length and red zone efficiency.
Yeah, now as of right now, I haven't really heard anything on potential other visitors that they could have as of right now. I think it's kind of more along the lines of, let's see what we have. And I think not the spring game in particular, but the spring practices, I think they really assessed what they had. And we kind of saw it peak out a little bit in the spring game with Isaiah Williams and Ashton Bethel-Roman. Like you said, we don't have Jerome Miles back on campus yet. He's a late signee. Well, he did sign, but he's going to be a late arrival over this summer. But we didn't even get to see Terry Bussey as well. So I think the wide receiver room, like you said, is going to be kind of maybe a reassessment of what they have in the room themselves, kind of looking at it to where, hey, maybe we don't have this 6'5", 220-pound wide receiver that we can just chuck it up to 20 yards into the end zone or when we're in the red zone. But maybe that's not what we necessarily need. maybe it is. Maybe they just haven't found the right guy to get on the roster. But I think what does give me a little bit more perspective is we didn't see a lot of spring entries into the transfer portal. I know we saw Eric Carner go in. I know we saw Ernest Campbell. Um, but it's guys that you got all your guys to pretty much stay. And I think that is a little bit more hopeful than what A&M could have asked for. And I know back in the winter, you made runs at guys like Nick Anderson. You could have had a run at Ted Hurst were he to fully enter the portal. Um, it's just that I think at this point, it's like maybe it is Jerome Miles coming in. Maybe we work with what we have, what we believe in, instead of having to try and insert a guy in the spring in this portal to come learn the offense in a couple of months. Maybe,
Yeah,
maybe, maybe
yeah,
that's it.
yeah. That no, I agree with you, and that's the thing that I've kind of come to the conclusion with this. It's been this, and we could talk about obviously Carner leaving was not surprising. I remember I was talking to one of my writers on staff, and we just said, look, I mean, this is going to be the case when they recruit so many tight ends. Carner is a very athletic, has a lot of potential, right? But he's going to end up probably going to maybe a Big 12 program or something like that and end up being a rotational guy and kind of fit better in those systems. But I think that they have a specific type with tight end now. And I think we saw that with kind of the guys that got to the transfer portal and what they have in recruiting, especially a guy like Keati Armstrong, who could play defensive end as well. He's just a big athletic guy. And I think they know that that they need you to inline block, and they also need you to spread out wide and play that kind of bigger wide receiver role for matchups, because that's Colin Klein is all about matchups in the passing game to obviously make Marcel Reed's job easier and get the offense to get those inches, as Jimbo Fisher used to say. But it is kind of interesting. I did write an article, I believe earlier this week, talking about the running back room, and so a lot of the there's a sect of the fan base. It's kind of interesting when you dissect, fans who are really engaged and what they're kind of thinking. And I mean, it's kind of interesting because we can only say so much of, everything's okay and the group is fine and, they got a lot of talent and depth. And then somebody kind of listening and goes, well, do they? Because Le'Veon Moss is coming off of a season-ending injury. Reuben Owens is coming off of a season-ending injury. Both of them did not. Or Reuben Owens did. Le'Veon Moss did not play in the spring game. Obviously, that has to do with just keeping him out. I mean, he doesn't need to play in that game, obviously. But there is some sentiment that maybe they're not as deep as we think. I'm at the point where, and I talked about this with Carter Carroll's a couple weeks ago, that this is Reuben Owens' year. This is the year where he needs to live up to that 5-star recruiting grade that every person on the planet in scouting high school football, saw him as an elite back, somebody who's going to make an immediate impact. Obviously, injuries hindered him. He had a pretty good showing during his first season, but the time is ticking, right? And if A&M is going to be a balanced offense in the way that Colin Klein wants to run his scheme, then you're going to have Owens live up to that versatility, catching balls out of the backfield, making his cuts, finding those holes, and showing that upfield burst that we all expect from him. And I'm going to be honest, the spring game was a non-factor with the running game. It's very hard to even gauge if they've made a lot of improvement. That's unfair. Obviously, we're not at every practice, and plus, we're not seeing a lot of extended reps. We're just kind of seeing practice reps that they allow us to in this new kind of college football media relationship. So yeah, it's one of those things where I keep coming back to it is Le'Veon Moss going to be 100%? Is he going to miss some games to start? We just don't know. We've heard, he's on track, right? We don't know how much that means. And if that's the case, Reuben Owens is the guy. And then Amari Daniels, who obviously is just a nice piece. Obviously showed that last year when Moss went out. Doesn't have the body or the frame to play, that type of bully ball that Moss can play. But he's serviceable, right? He's serviceable. He can do what you need on third down most of the time. He can give you something in the passing game, but he's a little banged up, right? And then behind them, you've got freshman backs who have potential, but they're freshmen back. So you kind of look at the transfer portal. There's not a ton of running backs out there that you would just go out, and plus you're competing with other teams that need maybe a starting running back. They're going to pay them more in NIL. They're going to have a better recruiting pitch. And I'm not saying like Mike Elko and them were gaslighting us or anything like that. I'm not accusing them of that. But what do you think about the group? And do you really think that they're in good shape, or is this maybe a situation where they do need to go get maybe a guy with a year or two under his belt that can give them some solid reps and give them more depth if Le'Veon Moss isn't able to return right away?
So I kind of lean on the side of they saw what Le'Veon Moss kind of did as a bell cow style of back, where Amari Daniels was able to come in even with Ruben Owens hurt and say, all right, we feel really good about running the ball 58 to 60% of the time, which is what they did. I think they felt like they currently feel like that they don't have to go into the portal right now with how it looks and say, hey, we need a little bit more. They probably feel, and this is just me guessing at this point right now, because none of us know exactly what is going on in the coaching staff's head at this point, post spring practices and spring portal closing, because you don't want to bring someone in right now with the spring portal already closed now. You have 5 backs, granted 2 of them are, or 6 backs, granted 2 of them are like, hey, freshman guys. But you still have all these running backs that you had this past year where it looked really, really good. I think you just have to balance out the pass to run game at this point. And you're going to see a lot of Ruben Owens back in the backfield with split backs, and kind of how we saw out of the passing game with Terry Bussey back there as well. So you kind of saw Terry Bussey on the left, Ruben Owens on the right, maybe get a little bit of the halfback blast action up either the middle or the left side. So what is going to happen is, at least in my mind, is that you're going to see Le'Veon Moss come back, whether it's in the summer, whether it's by that first game, whether it's they hold him out for a couple of games. But we're going to see him come back, and I think what the staff is banking on right now is Le'Veon Moss back in full form.
Yeah, I think it's probably going to be a limited snap count situation. That's a great point you make, actually. That if we'll obviously get more into kind of the scheme and stuff later in the summer of what they want to do, but yeah, I mean they've done that. They did that a lot and it was very successful. And that's kind of how you keep these guys healthy. It's kind of how you utilize that depth. And I'm not saying that guys like DeAndre Ridden and Jamario Mora, who I'm very high on, I think that he could end up being a very versatile weapon, even in year one, if they needed to go to him and if he's ready to go. And I think that's the thing that some fans forget, is that this backroom was decimated last season. And I mean, you basically had AJ Denoda as your key backup at one point. I mean, it's just, you don't have that situation anymore. You also have EJ Smith. We keep forgetting about EJ Smith. I mean, I do. I remember it's not just me. It's a ton of Aggie guys. And I'm just like, you kind of forget that he has an extra year of eligibility. So you do have somebody who is semi-reliable, who you trust, and who can give you valuable reps. But again, this is Ruben Owens' time to shine. He knows it. We know it. And it's not unfair to want these guys to live up to their recruiting ranking. It really isn't, because I'll say this. I watched a lot of Jerome Miles high school tape. That's an elite player who, if he reaches his ceiling in college, we're talking about not just a number one wide receiver. We're talking about a guy reaching over the century mark, double digit touchdowns. That's how good this kid is. So can he live up to it? Obviously, the Terry Busseys of the world and others, not sure, but they have a ton of skill on this team. And I just think right now, adding another back personally isn't the greatest idea. I agree with you there. I think you feel good enough, and you're not in that zone where you have to worry about cutting other guys and filling up spot. And it's just, they have other needs they need to address, and they have other areas where they kind of need to tweak some things. And we talked about Lyle Hemphill coming in to fix kind of the defensive technical issues with the safety group and the cornerbacks. And I think if you're feeling a little deja vu because, again, the way they finished the season at 1-4, you have another coach on the staff to try to fix these issues that were the problem at the end of the season. Because I don't blame, and my former co-host Will Stone, our first show, we talked about Marcel Reed, that I do not blame Marcel Reed for the way A&M ended the season. I just don't. And it's the same with Texas, is that Johnny Barron, who was his worst nightmare in that game, was just a first-round pick by the Denver Broncos. So, I mean, come on. It's going to happen to even good quarterbacks. And so a better Marcel Reed, a more confident Marcel Reed, you have more depth in the back room now. You got Ruben Owens back for the season, barring any knock on wood injuries. But you should just feel better. And you got the coach there that's going to tweak these issues, that's going to get your defense to play more sound and not give up those chunk plays. Then we're talking about a good team. We're talking about a team that has a very rough road ahead of them, but it's okay. It's not you drinking the Aggie Kool-Aid or whatever, saying, well, I think they'll be improved just because, it's not. I mean, my entire job is not to tell you guys what to think. It's to tell you guys, look, from what I've seen on the roster compared to last season, even, they're more talented. They're better in areas they struggled last season. They're more adept to how you have to run offense, how you have to run defense. And I'll say it again. Mike Elko could have done nothing. He could have kept the staff like it was. He could have said, screw you guys. I'm keeping Jay Bateman as full-time defensive coordinator. I'm not going to do anything. Suck it up. He didn't do that. He made a change. He knew he had to make a change. He hears the fan base. He understands this is his job. So I'm not going to have a diatribe about this, but I don't think they really need to do much. If they do need to do anything, we already talked about that. Maybe add another defensive tackle, maybe add another cornerback to kind of stir the room up. We shall see. We're going to end the show today. To congratulate all three A&M players who were drafted in the 2025 NFL draft. I kind of waited till the end to talk about this because I had a lot of fun. Obviously, I love the draft. I used to be in the scouting world all the time, so I love evaluating these guys. I personally think, you can disagree with me, but I do think Shamar Stewart was kind of the fit with Cincinnati right now. I'm not sure how Al Golden is going to use him. I think that he has a chance to be very good with them. Obviously, I do think that, putting him on the edge full-time, making him a full-time pass rusher, and fixing those issues he had of over pursuit, slow down when you get in the backfield, keep an eye on your target, and utilize that athleticism. I think he's going to end up, being a Pro Bowl type player. It's just, I don't know how fast it's going to take, how slow it's going to take. But I think Nick Scorton was one of the steals of the draft going to Carolina. I thought he dropped a little too far. And I heard a lot of people saying, well, he should have come back for another year. He would have been a first round pick. Nothing is guaranteed. I just want to tell you that is not guaranteed. I mean, and if you go back for another year and you get hurt and then you gain weight, or you're not playing a lot, scouts are going to take that into context, and you're not guaranteed anything. So the fact is that he has a chance to thrive with Carolina. He's going to end up probably being a strong side linebacker, I think, in his first year behind Jadeveon Clowney, who signed a recent 2-year deal. Obviously, he's a veteran. He's already in his 30s, so Nick is the future at that position, and I think he has a chance to be a good contributor next season.
Shamar Turner, let me tell you that Shamar Turner's fit with Chicago is probably my favorite out of the three.
I agree with you.
I think with him being down low, right up the middle, kind of honestly around that nose tackle type of place where you can get down with it's a 4-tech kind of D tackle. Yeah. I think they could really open it up. And I know Chicago's had all this history with defensive linemen that they can just kind of plug and play at this point. But I really do think that Chicago gets exceptionally better with Shamar Turner on the defensive line. And maybe you can share your thoughts, but this is probably my favorite fit out of all three.
Oh no, I agree. I think that the A&M connection with I think it's like Carolina's becoming an A&M hub, which is hilarious because I remember I was watching my dad. And I was writing the update on. I went, Damani Richardson is now a starter with them at Free State, which is incredible. I loved watching Damani, and I love that he kind of proved every scout wrong, which was kind of funny. But Bobby Brown is with Bobby Brown, right? Yeah, he's with them now, and now Scorton, and I mean it's just an Aggie hub, and it's one of those teams where when you go to a small market team, I actually love that for some players who maybe don't want to be in the spotlight right away and they just want to work really hard and get to the point they want to. I think Scorton is one of those guys who probably pretty disappointed with his sack total last year, and that after recording 10 with his last season at Purdue, and he only had 5 and didn't really show up in a couple games at the end of the season. I mean, he chose not to show up. I'm not going to say that. I think that's unfair to him, but I think he has a chance to really live up to when he was considered. I remember the early draft mocks. I mean, he was like a top 10 pick at that point, just based on his talent alone. So he has a chance to really just explode there and have a great career if he does end up staying in Carolina. But I agree, Turner. I love it for Turner, because I think a lot of people kind of forgot about him. He had the injury. He didn't participate in the combine, didn't participate in A&M spring combine. And he was just kind of sitting there going, look what I've done in my A&M career. And I think it's a fun way to go back and look at when he was defensive end and he had 6 sacks and he was just wrecking people off the edge. His versatility is elite. And I agree that kind of 4-eye shade at the outside position that's become very popular in defensive schemes, especially 4-3 defensive schemes. He's going to thrive in that because he's got the big body, he's got the strength, but he's got the athleticism. So he can end up being a very productive pass rusher in his career, and obviously gives a lot in the run. And I think his personality is a perfect fit for Chicago. He's a tough dude. He's not afraid to scuffle. Obviously, they're going to tell him, we don't want to draw flags like you did at A&M in your final year. But look, personality is everything with these guys. It's how they play. So look, if you're Texas and you're celebrating the 12 picks and, you said, hey, fine. I'm going to be honest, though. I remember my mom, she was here too, and she's not a football person. And she was like, wow, Ohio State, they have a lot of players. But, well, they just won a championship, okay?
Yeah.
So it's like that always happens. And if you're a playoff team and you have a lot of veteran good players that are kind of guys you could just fit into a depth chart. Texas had a lot of those guys, and they had a lot of star power too. But again, their quarterback went to the 6th round or something.
Miami, yeah,
Miami. So I can't even get into that. I mean, we'd spend an hour talking about the Quinn Ewers.
We really, really could. But
I think I read the other day he missed out on $8 million or something by not transferring.
Yeah, and I'll tell you what, I'll put a pin in it right now.
Yeah.
For me and Quinn Ewers, I fully respect his decision to go to the NFL and chase your dream. I think the legacy that he did leave at Texas is actually a plus. I think we're going to look back years from now and say that guy was Texas through and through, and I think that was the point. I think that
I agree with you.
Not only did he quote unquote bet on himself to go to the league, he wanted to go to the NFL, and I think it was at this point he felt the desire to go, and I fully respect that.
Oh no, I respect it. I'm not one of those people. I like Quinn Ewers personally. I think he's a good kid. I think that the traits are there. Scouting quarter I laugh even thinking about this. There's been the whole discussion about Shedeur Sanders and another thing we're not going to talk about on this show. But when you scout quarterbacks, you could ask the most veteran scout out there. It's the toughest position to scout. There are no perfect candidates. Cam Ward is not perfect. Cam Ward is the most polished guy, and a lot of it has to do with the fact that he's thrived in a ton of different systems. The fact that he was at Incarnate Word, the fact that he was with Washington State, and the fact that he thrived in his final season at the highest level with Miami. That's what makes you the number 1 pick. That in today's age, if you can do that and you're a quiet, smart guy, you're going to be the number 1 pick. You're going to make $40 million in your with your contract. But Shedeur Sanders, I've been debating, for a year with that kid of like, is he good enough to be a top 5 pick? I'm not going to give my personal opinion here, but with Ewers, I get the whole like he was the highest ranked player ever. So was Kyle Allen. Okay, we all remember Kyle Allen. I remember Kyle Allen was he had the perfect rating according to 24/7 Sports when he committed A&M. Hell, I was still in college or younger at that time, but yeah, it's not a perfect. It's not a barometer and connection of, well, if you're if you're this in high school, and you go to college and have 2 decent years or 3 decent years, you're going to be a top 5 pick. It's just not like that. It's
It's
not how
not.
it works. Cam Ward was a 0-star recruit because he didn't throw the ball. Quinn Ewers threw the ball a lot, and he has a lot of ball skills. And I'm going to be honest, he could end up thriving with Miami. I will say that right here. I'm not going to because Des Bryant said it, but he could end up being a perfect fit if he stays healthy and if he learns from the coaching staff. And I'll be cheering for the kid because this isn't, it's okay for those out there to cheer for other Texas guys because they're not even with Texas anymore. You don't want to see people fail because they're with your opposing, rival team. But it's an interesting pick. I thought there were a lot of interesting picks in this draft. But I'll say this for Texas A&M, I think Mike Elko should be very proud that after his first season with a team that you think Trey Zune, Armaj Reed-Adams, and Will Lee, they could have all gone. They could have all, gone to the draft and basically probably been picked in the first 3-4 rounds, I would think. But they came back, and that's why you only had 3. I think the 10 players who are going to be going to mini camps and stuff like that. Jade Walker is going to, I think he's with the Bears. Is a long list. Look, as we've seen in the past, A&M players end up making rosters and staying on rosters. So that's
exactly they do.
It's going to be a fun little exercise.
But it really is, and I kind of want to shout out the players that did go undrafted but did sign deals. So Trey Watson going to the Chiefs.
Yes.
Jay Walker, like you said, to the Bears. We do see Moose Muhammad go to the Panthers at a little bit more of that pipeline. I think that is really, really cool for him and his family to go over there. And then, of course, we got to talk about BJ Mays going to the Eagles.
And I think he's going to end up staying with the Eagles. I was so high on that kid. I think he should have been drafted. I think that he was at least a 6th-round pick, in my opinion. I don't really get it. I think there's maybe a speed issue or something like that. But one of the most fun players I've watched, portal players, last year. I mean, if I think Aggie football, I think of the plays that BJ Mays made at the end of the season. But very happy for those guys. It's going to be fun to see what they do.